Most of us have possibly heard this phrase, look before you leap. It might also be translated as, think before you take the plunge. Ensure that before you start, you are able to finish. There is another phrase in English which speaks about someone who begins well, but is unable to finish as he or she began. And it goes like this. He or she began with a bang, but ended with a whimper. Jesus was not a cost accountant, but possibly knew about cost accounting. And that is why in the readings of today, he is addressing anyone who wants to follow his way of life. What is the way of life of Jesus? The way of life of Jesus is a life of sacrifice, where a person regards him or herself as less than others, where a person considers and thinks about others before he or she thinks of himself. The way of life of Jesus is a way of giving even when one has very little to give. It is a way of serving and not wanting to be served. It is a way of humility and not of domination. It is a way where authority is not exercised as a person from on high, but authority is reaching out in love. This is the way to which Jesus invites anyone who wants to follow him. And this way, Jesus says, is not an easy way. Because the way of the world is a way of selfishness. The way of the world is a way of self-centeredness. The way of the world is saying that the more you have, the more you accumulate, the more you possess, the more you are regarded in society. And Jesus asks in his way of life to give away the excess that we have, or even the non-excess that we have, to give away even the little that we have so that someone else can be happy because of me. And that is why when he invites people to follow him, he gives two examples. And the first is of someone who wanted to build a home. In today's level in India, it's not easy for people to own homes of their own. We have to take a bank loan, for example. We have to ensure that we get a loan from the company in which we are working, for example. However, while one might take the loan from the bank or the company or another financial institution, what one has to regard before taking the loan is whether one can repay that loan. Otherwise, the house is confiscated. Otherwise, we have nothing, and the money that we have paid is lost. The same example is given by Jesus about a person who intends to build a tower. And the person who intends to build a tower must first sit down and ask him or herself whether he or she has the money, the wherewithal to do what has to be done. Otherwise, the person starts building, lays the foundation, and the tower comes up only slightly, and the person realizes that he doesn't have what it takes, and so has to abandon that project. Not only is the money which was invested lost, but people will look at that person as someone who could not complete what he or she began. He also gives another example of a king who wants to wage war with another king. The king who wants to wage war has to sit down and ask whether he has enough resources, enough soldiers, enough men to fight with the other king and to win. If he does not, then this king sends an emissary to sue for peace. In other words, Jesus is inviting anyone who would come after him to first discern. The word discernment is a word which is extremely important to understand the following of Jesus. What does it mean to discern? It means, first of all, that when I have to make a choice about two goods, even about something which is good and not so good, then I ask God for the gift of openness. I ask God for the gift of listening to His word. I ask God for the gift of wisdom. Our Blessed Mother Mary was a beautiful example of this openness. When the angel announced to her that she was to be the mother of God, her response was openness, and her final response was, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let what you have said be done unto me. You notice? Mary is not simply saying that she will be open to God. She is not simply saying that she will cooperate with God. Mary is saying that she will let God do in her. Because when God acts in and through her, her actions will not merely be efficient actions, but efficacious as well. So this is the first step in this process of discernment, where I pray for God's gift of openness, for God's gift of wisdom. The second step is I look at the positives of the decision that I am to make. Let us say that I have to change my job. I look at the positives of this new job. The timings are better. The salary is more. The workplace is closer to my home. It seems that the colleagues are more friendly. The environment in the office is beautiful. These are the positives. These are the advantages. I look at them and I put them down on a sheet of paper. I stop after I have done that, and I pray once again for the gift of openness. And then I look at the not so positives or the negatives of my decision. When I go to a new place, I will have to make my mark. It will take me some time. Even though the place is closer to my home, it seems a little more difficult to get there than to get to the place where I am working now. I feel that the colleagues will be friendly, but I'm not so sure because I have not interacted with them. I know these colleagues in the place where I am working, and they are extremely friendly with me. When I leave this company, I'm not sure what my future is going to be in the new one. Will they accept me during my period of probation, or will they say you do not fit into the job? These are the negatives. Once I finish the positives and the negatives, I pray one more time. And finally, my prayer is that God bless me with the wisdom to make the right decision. Once I feel confident that God has opened my heart and has opened my mind to make the right decision, I decide, asking God for His grace and help and courage and strength with the decision I have made. This is what discernment means. And especially when we have to make important decisions in our lives, like following the way of Jesus, like the way of selflessness, like the way of giving, like the way of love, we have to make this discernment. We have to stop and ask ourselves whether we will be able to persevere and continue. It is easy to follow Jesus for a day. It is easy to follow Jesus partially. It is easy to follow Jesus on our terms. But to follow Him consistently and perseveringly, to follow Jesus without counting the cost, to follow Jesus not on my terms but on His terms, requires discernment. And so the readings of today are calling for wisdom, are calling for discernment before we make a decision. Do I have the wherewithal to follow a life of selflessness? Do I have the capital to follow a life of giving? Am I confident, courageous, and strengthened enough that I can follow Jesus on His way?